Selling your company's products and services in the largest markets. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. This is an introduction to selling your products and services that your company has in non-US markets. Most of us have, or at least we start with selling services or products inside the US. And it's logical that we do it that way. However, there are a lot of advantages to selling in a foreign market, and I'm going to present the motive for doing that and then how to get started doing that. So it's very common that US-based businesses have a US first mindset for selling, for sales, right? So the reasons include things like there's no language barrier. English is spoken throughout the country. There are no duties or customs selling from between the states. There are state and local taxes, but that's inevitable. Those are not really duties or customs, and those are paid by the buyer. And shipping and logistics issues are they've been worked out for decades, for a very long time, starting with the Pony Express with the U.S. Postal Service. So there are a lot of reasons to start in the U.S. and to think this is where you'd like to stay. But once you tackle a foreign market, it will increase your know-how on the quirks that arise to selling into non-U.S. markets. There are a lot of advantages to gaining that know-how. Lots of advantages that people really don't think about because our market is very large, but there are shortcomings in our market, and I will present a couple of issues that come up as we go through in this video. So some motives for selling to a foreign market. We're going to sell our products. We're going to sell our services. We're going to start with one foreign market. The easiest market that we can think of that makes sense for our background, you know, our language background. Maybe people in the company are bilingual or they know more than one language or more than one culture. When I was in California, when we lived in Silicon Valley, we had friends from all over the world who had come to Silicon Valley to work in the tech industry there. We worked in the tech industry. We had friends from Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Italy, France, Germany, the UK, almost every country you can think of, South America, Central America, all over the place, Russia, Eastern Europe. So those companies come to the U.S. They send their employees to the U.S. to develop branches here and to be able to sell into the U.S. market. And that's what we're doing here. We're saying we have a U.S. business. We are going to develop some know-how to be able to sell into foreign markets. What are the advantages? What are the motives? So economic diversification. If the U.S. market for your industry is not in good shape, for whatever reason, maybe a foreign country has a different economic situation. It's not that uncommon that countries will be in different situations economically. Not all countries. I mean, if you think of Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., we're sort of tightly coupled. But beyond that, other countries can have economic diversification that that if we're just thinking about the U.S., we lack. So economic diversification, if one country is doing poorly, the other country you sell into might be doing better. Advantages over U.S. competitors, the know-how of selling into a foreign market. If your competitor lacks that, you have a leg up. If sales fall off in the U.S. and you're selling into a foreign market and your competitors don't, maybe that weakens your competitors. Maybe that makes them eligible to be acquired, to be bought out if they start weakening. So the know-how of selling in a foreign market is highly beneficial. It really puts your own U.S. local sales into perspective when you start learning about the quirks of selling into a second market that is offshore, that's not in the U.S. Also, once you start operating in a foreign market, you tend to learn of opportunities in that market where you're operating that people who only focus on U.S. sales never learn about, never hear about. So you're immersed in that foreign culture because you're selling into it. You can hear about opportunities that may not exist in the U.S. and your U.S. competitors never learn about because they're sort of a more closed-minded. They're sticking onshore only. Also, there could be a saturated U.S. market for your product or service that doesn't exist in a foreign country. You might be able to find an opportunity to sell in a foreign market that is not saturated, while the U.S. might well be saturated. So here are some examples of products that sell in foreign markets, but not nearly as well as their home country. K-pop is much bigger in the United States than it is in Korea. The sales numbers are massive in the United States, not so much in Korea. The sales are not the same. Another example, Cuban cigars. So Cuban cigars are big sellers in the U.S., but in the Cuban population, they just don't have the economy to support that kind of a luxury item. So they're made in one country. the makers of those products looked to another market. You know, if you grow tobacco and you manufacture Cuban cigars and you try selling them local only, you've really limited yourself. So what these folks did is they decided we're going to find a larger market. An example from my past, when I was in the music industry a long time ago, well, not that long ago, but I started life as a rock guitarist in bands. The Scorpions is a rock band from Germany. Their prospects were kind of limited in Europe. When they came to the U.S., their economic opportunities exploded. So a lot of countries, you probably heard of the British invasion, where a lot of British bands struck it rich in the United States. So it's not that uncommon that a home country of a product or a service is not a very good market, and they have to go offshore to find a larger market. Bailey's Irish Cream is a liqueur, a sweet form of Irish whiskey. It doesn't sell that well in Ireland. It's a big hit in the United States. So the makers are in Ireland. They looked abroad to expand their economic opportunities. That's what we're talking about doing here. We're trying to figure out ways to sell into a foreign market to expand our economic opportunities. There might be something unique about your product or service that's really well suited to some foreign market, and it might just take some experimenting to find the foreign market. Sriracha hot sauce is really big in the U.S., not so much in Thailand. In Thailand, it's too common to be thought of as cuisine. It's originally from Thailand. It's much bigger in the U.S. than in its home country. So all these, the origin of all these things were from countries where they did not do that well, and they looked offshore to find better market opportunities. So that's what we're talking about doing. We have a a moderately successful U.S.-based local business, and we're just saying, can we find a foreign market, one foreign market where we might get a toehold in and learn and develop some know-how of selling into that foreign market so that we can, maybe then at some point we can become more ambitious and find an even larger foreign market to sell our products or services to. And it would really give you an advantage over U.S. competitors who don't do that, who just want to stay in the U.S. So here are some things to think about when you're trying to choose your first foreign market to sell into. Geographic proximity. It's obvious that if you sell something to Mexico or Canada, logistically, that's a pretty easy thing to do. I would say, though, that the duties, the logistics for Canada are kind of, because we ran into this. We were sourcing items from Canada, and the duties were a little bit unfortunate. It was kind of surprising because we thought, wait a minute, this is our next door neighbor. Why is it so expensive to ship things? But there was something when it passed through customs out of Canada into the U.S., the customs duties were horrific. But that being said, if you're trying to find something close, maybe you have a product that does not lend itself to being shipped very well. There's a product called, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. They sell live turtles, and it's a very successful business. They sell live turtles. It's a big business, very profitable. But for live animal sales, you'd want something like that, a geographic proximity. You could not ship them successfully very far away from the U.S. It's a U.S.-based company. I wish I could remember the name of that company. Okay, so we're trying to choose our first foreign market to sell to. Proximity is one option to think about. Language is another option. So if you're an English speaker, some good news, because there are a lot of choices. If you're a native English speaker, here are some countries you can think about if you're trying to sell into an English language market. There's Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, Singapore, which was a British colony for a long time, India, another British colony, Hong Kong was a British colony, Taiwan and the United States have had import-export trade between our two countries for a long time. English is spoken there. The Philippines. Okay, so some people don't know this, but in 1898, the U.S. and the Philippines started a very close, almost a colonial relationship, sort of like Hawaii and the U.S. did. Hawaii became a state in 1959. The Philippines never did become a state, but it's sort of like that sort of connection between. So those are some English-speaking choices: Canada, Australia, the UK, Singapore, India, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the Philippines, and there are others. And if your business has founders who speak two or more language, you have tons more opportunities. If you're using language as the way to choose a first foreign market to sell into, a lot more choices. For example, if you're a Spanish speaker or Portuguese, you have all of South America. Brazil, Portuguese speaking, huge country. All of Central and South America speaking Spanish. Okay, so proximity is one way to choose a foreign market. Language is another way to choose. Another way to choose is gross domestic product. If you say to yourself, We want to find the largest possible market to sell into that has the largest number of consumers who buy stuff, consumers and businesses who buy stuff. So I've ranked them. The United States GDP is a $30 trillion market. 30 trillion. It's the biggest on the face of the earth. The U.S. market is the largest, but it's not the be-all, end-all. China is 19 trillion. Germany is 5 trillion. Japan 4.4 trillion. India 4.2 trillion. The United Kingdom 3.7 trillion, France 3.3 trillion, Italy $2.5 trillion market, Canada 2.3 trillion, Brazil 2.3 trillion market. So those are the largest markets you could sell into. If you say to yourself, I want to maximize the market opportunity, because when it comes down to it, if you decide you want to sell to China, you can hire a bilingual person who speaks Chinese and English to assist you to do that. When Japan started selling cars and motorcycles into the U.S., if you looked at the early manuals, user guides, and shop manuals for products from Japan, it's a little bit comical how because they hired local people who had some knowledge of English but not a lot of knowledge. And nowadays you could probably get away with using an AI agent for translation, but for cultural references, you should probably hire someone who is actually from that culture and that locale who also speaks English. If you wanted to choose China or Germany or Japan or France, you probably want to make sure that you don't make a cultural blunder with your marketing, because that does happen from time to time. But basically the idea is, we're in the US, we have products and services, we have a moderately successful business. How can we get a leg up on competitors? Well, a lot of US-based companies have a US first and sometimes a US only mindset for sales. But as you can see, there are a lot of very well-known products that sell well in the US and not in their home country, the country of origin. Those people were smart enough to look offshore, and that's kind of what we're talking about doing here. And you can get your feet wet with an easy choice, close proximity or same language, or a little more challenging would be choosing the largest by GDP to sell into. Now, there's some resources that actually are somewhat designed to aid in cross-border trade, okay, to make it easy to buy and sell in foreign countries. There's the International Chamber of Commerce. There's the International Trade Administration. There's the U.S. Commercial Service. And if you go online and you do searches on selling in a foreign market from the U.S., as an example, as a search, you can find other organizations that are designed to help people begin to export. And you really want to start simple. You really want to develop some know-how incrementally, because there's a learning curve, right? If you decide to start selling in Germany, in any country really where the laws are different, you have to be cognizant of cultural differences. Even in the United Kingdom, which is English speaking, there are cultural differences. Just as there are cultural differences between perhaps the southern U.S. and the northeastern states, there can be cultural differences, right? When you start talking about two different countries, so you'd probably want to make sure you have someone either part-time or a service you could hire to educate your company in. We're planning on going to this foreign country. We're going to start marketing and selling there. Here is our first draft marketing material for that country. Please help us. Please proofread this and tell us how to do this right. And the one way to do this, to be safe, to be sure, is to hire more than one cultural contractor, cultural, what's the right word? Consultant, cultural consultant, more than one, so they can cross-check each other. Because you want to make sure when you're going into a foreign country that your marketing materials are not self-defeating, that they don't make any critical cultural blunders, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, but you can look up these organizations, the ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, the International Trade Administration, the U.S. Commercial Service, and it's very beneficial to get some economic diversification, and to avoid possible saturation. If the U.S. market is saturated for your product or service, it can be helpful to have a second market that you're selling into that can tide you over while the U.S. market sorts itself out. Usually in a saturated market, what happens is there will be consolidation. There will be a consolidator who decides this industry is fragmented, it's saturated, it's time to roll up all these smaller players into one larger entity. And while you're operating in a foreign country, you can do well while that's happening, as an example. So if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys post in the comments. And I really want to thank everyone for watching, and have a great day.